Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Kelly Green Hour, where it is playoff time in Philadelphia as the Philadelphia Eagles are set to host the Green Bay Packers on Wildcard Weekend, 4:30 p.m., Lincoln Financial Field, Sunday, January 12th. It can't get here soon enough. I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, finally made it to the playoffs. This season goes by so quick every year. Let's hope the playoffs last at least another month.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. But I mean, I'm just excited. I mean, it's football, playoff football. Playoff football is always the best. I mean, hopefully it's better than the college playoffs been, because that's just been dreadful for the most part. But otherwise, I think this is gonna be a good game. They got a whole lot of really good games lined up this weekend. So I think it's definitely gonna be one of their best rating-wise super wildcard weekends. Or wildcard weekends ever.
It's the NFL. The ratings are ridiculous anyway. I think of the top 100 TV shows or whatever, like things watched on TV, excuse me, in 2024, 90 of them were NFL games. So it doesn't matter.
It's hilarious.
It could be the Jaguars, Panthers people are going to watch.
It's hilarious how much the negativity really doesn't impact them like it impacts, other leagues or media organizations or anything. You can have 100 million people talking trash and there's going to be 500 million people watching. So it really doesn't matter. But
I always
time, baby.
I always talk about, I've asked people that don't watch the Super Bowl, I'm like, why? Like, what do you do other than watch the Super Bowl? Because so many people watch the Super Bowl. And it always amazes me when there are some people that don't watch it when, like, it seems like, now I know it's not that number, but it seems like 9 out of every 10 people, excuse me, are watching the Super Bowl. But we'll talk about that when we get there in a couple of weeks. Before we get started, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow the Eagles Pinpool Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcast at Eagles Pinpool Network. Be sure to like, subscribe, rate the network and our show. And if you're tuning in live, let us know your thoughts on the game, your prediction, players to watch, and a couple of keys to the game. Well, this week, the news that wasn't so surprising to me, Jalen Hurts cleared concussion protocol today. Who is shocked? Because I'm not. All these talking heads in the media that are like, Jalen, he's been out for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, he hasn't cleared yet. What's going on? If they needed him last week, he would have cleared concussion protocol last week. By not,
100%.
Like I said on Monday, by not clearing concussion protocol, he didn't have to talk to the media. He just didn't have to be seen. He could kind of get off of his feet, could hopefully get his broken finger healed. So like there was no rush in getting him cleared from concussion protocol. I do believe that if they needed to win the game last week, or they needed him to play last week, that he would have cleared concussion protocol. So I wasn't sitting here freaking out like a lot of people, and it's good to know that we get number one, we get the leader back, and to get things rolling going into the playoffs.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I've been all over Twitter and I said, it's almost malpractice for the national media to either pretend that they don't know what the concussion protocol is or how it works, or that they were really just looking for a really ill-advised topic to run with on Monday and Tuesday, because they knew he couldn't clear the concussion protocol. They knew Nick Sirianni was going to stay mum about it, because of course he's going to. If he doesn't have to disclose anything, why would he? Especially to the Philadelphia media. So either way, it's just such a pointless waste of 15 minutes of every single First Take, the facility, Get Up, whatever show you watch. It was the biggest waste of 15 minutes to contemplate, well, what if Kenny Pickett has to go? And it was just a waste. We all knew he was going to clear the concussion protocol. We all know that if they really need to in a moment, just like you said last week, if they needed him in week 18, if it meant something to be out there week 18, he would definitely have been out there week 18. He would have cleared that concussion protocol, no problem. But it's a good reason to give him a couple weeks of rest, whereas some of the guys like Devontae Smith could have used that couple weeks. AJ Brown clearly could have used that couple weeks. Everybody is banged up, and if there's a chance to, I don't want to say manipulate the injury protocol, but manipulate the injury protocol, they're going to take advantage of it this late in the season after a week 5 bye.
Exactly. And the other news for the Eagles on the injury front, AJ Brown's been dealing with a knee. He's going to be good to go. And Devontae Smith dealing with a little back stiffness. He's going to be good to go. Quickly thinking, I mean, there's no – the Eagles are going to have 22 of 22 starters, not counting Brandon Graham, I guess 21 of 22 if you want to include Brandon Graham. But I don't think he was starting week 1. But from that first game in Brazil against the Packers, the Eagles have 22 of 22 starters. And I'm throwing Cooper DeJean over Avonte Maddox because Cooper DeJean is way better than Avonte Maddox. On the Green Bay front, Jordan Love's going to play. That's also not a surprise to me. I expected him to be out there. And as him and Malik Willis both practice fully today. So they're going to have their quarterbacks. They won't have Christian Watson, obviously, as he's torn his ACL. They won't have Jair Alexander, but they have Xavier McKinney on the defensive side of the ball. They have Preston Smith, I believe. Excuse me. They have Preston Smith on
Rashawn
Gary. They don't have Preston Smith anymore.
No, Sean Gary, Kenny Clark.
Yeah. Lucas Van Ness, Quay Walker, Edger, and Cooper. So I looking at their cornerback situation, I don't know how. I know AJ Brown's not going to be 100%, but I don't know how they're going to stop AJ Brown. I mean, if they're gonna load the box to try to stop Saquon, who had 3 touchdowns in the first game with the Eagles in game 1, in week 1 against the Packers in Brazil, where the Eagles won 34-29, you're going to leave one-on-one for AJ Brown and Devontae Smith against that. Was it Valentine and Nixon? Good luck with that if you're the Packers. So it's going to be pick your poison for the Packers. The Eagles were able to put up 34 points in week 1 in the first real game in Kellen Moore's offense, and both teams have evolved since then. But I think the Eagles are right now kind of going in an upward trend, where the Packers, with the injuries and just the talk out of their locker room, kind of going down a little bit. And I still won't count the Packers out. You picked the Packers to go to the Super Bowl in the preseason. We saw what the Packers did as a 7 seed last year, going to Dallas, destroying the Cowboys, which it is the Cowboys in a playoff game, so that's kind of not surprising. But yeah, I'm expecting at least early going, it's going to be a close game. I'm going to tell you now, the Eagles are going to come out slow. Don't panic. I know I'm saying that to the wrong fan base in the wrong city, but do not panic early. The Eagles are going to come out slow, especially with, Jalen not having played for 3 weeks. They're going to come out slow, but they're going to get their footing. They're going to ride Saquon Barkley, and they're going to come away with a victory.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, as soon as we kind of started talking about the whole Jalen Hurts was in the concussion protocol, he was going to, he missed the 2 weeks. We kind of prefaced it on the last episode where we were talking about they're going to start slow. They're bound to start slow. It likely has nothing to do with Jalen Hurts in the concussion protocol. They're just a slow starting team. It's just a way that they kind of start to assert their dominance and get a feel for the team that they're against. It's really going to be interesting because when you look at these two teams statistically, offensively and defensively, and I know that defensively they're missing a huge piece of like Jair Alexander, and they're missing a pretty significant piece in Christian Watson. But statistically, these teams are almost identical offensively and defensively. It's really interesting. Like the Green Bay Packers, for how they've looked on offense and defense, the big boom games have outweighed the lesser games because they are statistically very close to the Philadelphia Eagles. They're like from a defensive standpoint, if we look at just a yardage perspective, they rank 5th in offense, 5th in defense. The Philadelphia Eagles rank 8th in offense, 1st in defense. They're very, very similar. And the play style that they play with, I trust Jordan Love to air it out more than Jalen Hurts. I won't lie. But Jalen Hurts has the more reliable, when he airs it up, he can trust his wide receivers. I trust the wide receivers we have more. I trust Jordan Love airing it out more. So it's just his ability when he's throwing the ball. Of course, there have been games where we've seen the turnovers, where he's committed some turnovers, made some bad plays, but he's a guy who can also, and one of the things that has made the Green Bay Packers most dangerous is they're able to put up a lot of points for when they need to put up a lot of points for. And that's one of the things that had me on board with them early in the season and putting them in the Super Bowl picture. Of course, I didn't want to see them playing the Philadelphia Eagles. But we couldn't have predicted that, none of us predicted that the AFC North was going to be the powerhouse of the entire NFL with a 15-2 Detroit Lions and a 14-3 Minnesota Vikings. So I did not expect this to be the outcome, but I did not want to see us playing the Green Bay Packers necessarily in the first round. But then when the injuries that piled up, I start to feel a little bit more confident, but definitely it's a tale of two similar tapes, and especially in the way that they're going to want to assert their dominance. The Green Bay Packers are going to want to assert Josh Jacobs, and the Eagles are going to want to assert Saquon Barkley as the focal point of these offenses. And then I think it's going to come down to which quarterbacks, like what defense can get that big stop, and then what quarterback might be able to air that ball out and get that big play that could ultimately be the difference maker. One thing I know for damn sure, after hearing that he missed a 33-yard field goal attempt in practice, is I don't want to have to rely on the leg of Jake Elliott, because I trust Brandon McManus's leg over Jake Elliott's at this point, and that is something that is very dangerous to think about.
Elliott hasn't missed a kick in the playoffs, but yeah, he has his inconsistency this year is troublesome. After he missed that 33-yarder, he did make, I think, a 35 and a 37-yarder. So that's neither here nor there, but we'll see what happens.
But when do you know if he's going to miss or hit? You don't. That's the issue with Jake Elliott.
I think early in the game is when you're going to have to find out potentially, like if it's 4th and 6 from the 31, do you try a 48-yard field goal in this the first quarter? And I think if you do that, and depending on if he misses it or makes it, then that could kind of determine the way you're thinking going forward the rest of the game. So, I mean, that's going to be an interesting call. Obviously, Sirianni has talked up Jake Elliott. I don't expect him to do anything else, but we'll see how he really feels when we get to certain situations in the game and it's 4th down, and depending on the yardage, the time, and the situation, will he go for it, or will they decide to go with Elliott and see if he can make the field goal? The one thing that the Eagles, I talked about how the Eagles are going to start slow. One thing Green Bay does is start quick, so that's going to be, in week 1, the Eagles handed the ball to Green Bay in plus territory the first couple possessions, and the Eagles defense stood tall, only giving up 6 points. That was key. The Eagles and obviously the Eagles defense being ranked number 1 in the NFL. Gotta hope that early in the game they withstand the kind of the onslaught or the storm that Green Bay might be coming with early. It's going to be the Josh Jacobs show, I believe. And they'll be able to go play action off of that to try to get the ball to Dobbs and Wicks and Reed. Tucker Kraft. They're going to try to get Jordan Love outside the pocket. You don't want to be standing in the pocket with Jalen Carter coming right at you. So I think that's what we're going to see from Matt LaFleur and this Packers offense. And we'll see what Vic Fangio has in store for the defense. And again, I mentioned the big change on the Eagles defense is Cooper DeJean from the week 1 matchup, Cooper DeJean in, Avonte Maddox out. DeJean has been outstanding in the slot. He got votes for the All-Pro as a slot, which is awesome for a rookie. A guy that if he didn't get hurt in training camp, imagine him starting week 1 and how different. I mean, they still went 14-3, so it's kind of hard to complain, but how different things could have been from the start. Maybe the defense doesn't give up 29 points to Green Bay early on, and they don't look bad against Atlanta in week 2. And there's no talk of if Saquon catches the pass, that's a win right there. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how the Matt LaFleur versus Vic Fangio angle goes, because Matt LaFleur has talked big time about Fangio and how his defense is the toughest defense to prepare for. So I'm looking forward to that matchup.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Matt LaFleur, like, all respect to him, he's a great offensive coordinator. He's done some really good things with that, obviously, that massive transition from, Aaron Rodgers to Jordan Love, taking that risk with Josh Jacobs. He's carrying, the youngest roster in the NFL. It's really impressive altogether what he's been able to do, and what the resilience and just how good this team is altogether. And that's what makes them so dangerous, because you just don't know what they're going to be capable of and what they're going to bring on any given day. I agree with you. It'll be really interesting, obviously, from what do you do? Like, this is a top 10, this is a top 5 offense, Russian offense against a top 1 Russian defense in the Eagles defense versus the Packers offense. This is a top 10 Russian defense in the Green Bay Packers versus a top 5 Russian offense in the Philadelphia Eagles. It's going to be so interesting to see how these two teams played out, because at the beginning of the season, it was really different, honestly, the way that the teams looked. Of course, the Philadelphia Eagles still went out there and put up 144 rushing yards, which actually sounds very minimal. Obviously, we're slipping and sliding all over that field, but is minimal compared to what they ended up going off and doing. And then the Philadelphia Eagles gave up 163 rushing yards in that week 1 matchup. And I'm just skimming through right now. They gave up 166 to the Ravens. That's it. There's been no other game where they gave up more than that week 1 matchup. And the majority of those matchups were under 100 or bordering right near 100 yards rushing that they gave up as a defense. So things have changed hugely since, because it was Saquon Barkley in his first game with the team. It was Josh Jacobs in his first game with the team. Obviously, the Eagles defense kind of slumped for those first 4 weeks, if we can call it a slump, compared to what the rest of the season has looked like. So it's so different. It's going to be so interesting to watch both of these teams go at it, and knowing that, the strong point for both of these offenses is also the strong point for both of these defenses that they're facing. So it's going to be important. And I know that, we've kind of said this almost every single week. Do not back off of the run just because you might struggle. But I think it's been pretty clear with Kellen Moore. He is not going to back off of Saquon Barkley, no matter whether it's getting 1 yard, 2 yards, no matter if you go for multiple 3 yards or less runs or negative plays, that he is not going to give up. And for the Green Bay Packers, it's exactly the same way. They're not going to give up on Josh Jacobs. They're going to make sure that they can assert Josh Jacobs, because they want to take that pressure off of Jordan Love, because as we know, Jordan Love has been known to turn the ball over a little bit. He has 11 interceptions on the year, so 25 touchdown passes to 11 interceptions. It's a near 3% interception rate, which is pretty high in today's NFL. So we know that if we can apply the pressure early on, that will make Jordan Love make decisions that might cause him to turn the ball over. And over the last few games, the Philadelphia Eagles have been forcing a significant number of turnovers. Of course, it was against the Giants, only 1. But before that, with the start in defense against the Cowboys and Commanders, they forced 9 turnovers across 2 weeks. But this is also the same team that forced only 2 turnovers through the first 4 weeks. And then they absolutely found their niche after that in forcing some turnovers, and have actually now ranked top 5 in the entire league in turnover percentage. So it's definitely going to take, a strong stand from this Eagles defense against Josh Jacobs, to show we're not going to give an inch against Josh Jacobs, and we're going to make sure that we can stop him the whole way. So it's going to take, some fundamentals from a tackling perspective, and get him back to just the basics in football. Make those plays. Don't think too far ahead. Hold those gaps. Stop those gaps. It's going to take Jordan Davis having another game like he had in week 18. And I know that was against the New York Giants, but we need that confidence to carry over. And then, of course, Jalen Carter. If you have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on their game, filling 4 of those gaps almost at all times, it's going to make the night very difficult for the Green Bay Packers offense, especially trying to assert Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, and then they won't be able to get the play action passing game going, to Reed, who had a 70-ish yard touchdown against the Eagles in week 1. Wicks is also pretty explosive. We know they don't have Watson, but they still have weapons. And, the one thing I think that's big difference between last year's wildcard game for Green Bay against Dallas and this week against the Eagles, the link is much more of a home field advantage than AT&T Stadium. I've been to AT&T Stadium. Like, there's not much of a home field advantage there for Dallas. The link is going to be completely different. It's going to be loud. It's going to be cold, which doesn't really matter to him, to Green Bay because they're from Wisconsin. But it's going to be a frenzy. And when the Eagles play a home playoff game, man, it's different. The atmosphere gets boosted up tenfold from the fans. And it's a 4:30 game, so Liquid Courage is going to be drunk for a while from the 6 a.m. tailgates all the way through kickoff. So it's going to be a different atmosphere for that Green Bay team, and they're going to want to come out quick to try to get the Eagles fans restless and booing and whatnot, booing against against the Eagles themselves. So that's what Green Bay is going to want to do. It wouldn't shock me if they win the toss, take the ball, and try to go down the field and score right away. But that's going to be the interesting part. How the Eagles are going to, like I mentioned earlier, how the Eagles withstand the firestorm early on from Green Bay. One thing,
and a much better field too, because they were slipping and sliding all over Brazil. So we know it's a much better field. So that's going to help.
And they just replaced the sod after last week's game, and the Eagles been practicing on it the last couple of days. So we know that they're definitely going to be prepared with the great cleats. That Reed touchdown, CJGJ slipped, when he was trying to come and make a tackle. I don't expect that to happen again, and I expect the coverage to be a lot better for the Eagles this week. With Jalen Hurts coming back, and we talk about the running game, the RPO has been a big part, when Jalen's in there. Do you think Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni are telling Jalen, don't keep it, don't want to risk you getting hit? Or do you think it's important for Jalen Hurts to maybe take a hit just to be like, hey, okay, I got this. Like, I get that one hit, get it out the way, I'm up, I'm fine, no symptoms. And I can go and just play the game the way I know how to play it. What are your thoughts on that?
I think he's going to have to be smart. I mean, I think I don't think that he necessarily has to take a hit, but he's got to get down a bit earlier. It might cost us a few yards here and there to take the slide a bit earlier, but I don't think it's worth taking the hit. I don't think it's just to see, are you good? Because you never know. Sometimes you take the hit, you get up, you're good to go. Sometimes you take the hit and you're Jalen Hurts 3 weeks ago and you're in the concussion protocol. So you don't want to test that, especially with the referees, because while there is this protocol in place, we ultimately know and understand that if a ref thinks a hit is bad enough or feels the circumstance warrants, they're the ones who are going to take you off the field. And who knows how long that could be. And once that happens, it's an independent neuro person, but that's the big impact on the entire game. That independent person, their job is to sit there and say, this guy can't go back in there. So if a ref thinks it's bad enough and then he pulls him off and we're like, he's going to be back, that wasn't a bad hit at all. It all relies on an independent person as well. So I don't think you want to test your luck on taking hits. I also think Kellen Moore is going to attempt to protect him a little more. We found a lot of success with play action. Maybe we continue to move more towards a play action versus, less than RPO circumstances. But I know that you're going to want to try and throw the RPO in there here and there. So it's really going to be interesting to see how they balance it. But I don't think they're going to want him to take a hit, because if we get by this game and we win, but it costs us, Jalen Hurts because he just wanted to test himself and take a hit, that could test himself out of the playoffs. That could test himself out of the next minimum week. You don't want to test your luck, especially with these concussions and how much independent stuff goes into it, from the referees to the independent neurologist on the sideline. So I think he just has to play it smart. If he's going to run, if he feels he can confidently take that ball and run, slide early. don't go for those extra yards if you don't have to. I mean, unless it's like a dire circumstance, but I mean, you got to be smart. You got to play it smart. We're playing for the long haul. 4 weeks, Super Bowl. You got to think about get through this week, get through the next week, and keep going. But you have to have in mind your health just as much as getting those extra few yards in the first quarter of a game or in the second quarter of a game when so much more can change.
Yeah, and it's weird how certain players seem to pass the concussion protocol a lot quicker than other players. So
how independent is an independent neurologist?
That's very true. Like you don't know for sure. Like they could secretly be a fan of a different team and be like, I don't think you should go back out there, and might not like a certain team or player or whatever. And again, be like, we need to go into the locker room. We're going to hold you out, and that could affect the game. I also don't anticipate, like CJ getting thrown out. Apparently, the NFL sent out a memo about unsportsmanlike conduct and all that to all the playoff teams, and obviously the refs have their eyes on a guy like CJ and Jalen Carter, so hopefully they're able to keep their heads and not do anything to get these penalties and get thrown out the game, because we saw what happened against Washington when CJ got thrown out, and we know that Jalen Carter's an emotional player and he likes to he'll show it. So hopefully that they're able to keep calm, which I anticipate that they'll be able to do, and just go about playing the game the right way. And not putting their team in bad situations and being taken out, or like in CJ's case, like that Washington game, being taken out and then your replacement just can't make a play. I think that if it's interesting because if the Eagles sign and Lewis sign, I think, how do you say it? Sign, I think is how you say it. I don't know how much of the defense he knows, but he can't be as bad as Tristan McCollum, right? Like Tristan McCollum was pretty bad. But Lewis Sign wasn't on the team, so who knows? But
I think that's a forward-looking move. That's a move where he wants him on the roster, so he can put him on, tag him with a futures contract in the offseason, keep him on the roster.
I thought he would put him on the practice squad then, not on the active roster.
Well, but you're trying to protect him. Obviously, people at the teams at this point might be looking towards next season just as much if they got that extra roster spot or two at the very, very back end. And you're like, well, if I need him, I'm confident putting him out there. I mean, we'll see. Maybe your assumption about, he couldn't be as bad as Tristan McCollum. Maybe there's others within the organization who feel the same way. But I think that was a very forward-thinking move into next year. And he's had a rough start to his NFL career, but here you go. You bring him in to, the Philly Dogs, and he's got a bunch of his old teammates around him. Maybe he can find that old Lewis scene, that got him that first-round draft capital in the first place.
Yeah, and he even talked about it. He's like, when he walked in, it was like seeing family. And then and they were asking him, like, so, going to Georgia, you heard about Philly, and he goes, yeah, like everybody at Georgia knows about the Philly Dogs. So, excuse me. That oh my God, that yeah, like it's funny. Like when you look at mock drafts, I just look to see who the best Georgia defensive player is and see if the Eagles might have the potential need for that player. It's pretty funny. No, but yeah. So this matchup, man, it's going to be a good one. I think it's going to be close. This might be one of the best matchups of the weekend. Like looking at them, it's, the Steelers-Ravens, obviously, with it being an AFC North matchup. Bucks and Washington has a chance to be a high-scoring, flying up and down the field type of game. But I do think the Eagles, and Packers has a chance to be probably the best game of the weekend.
I definitely agree with you on that point. Like just going through them, like I think the Chargers and Houston could be close, but not necessarily for good reasons. I feel like Houston just hasn't been the team that they were last year. Although it would be fun to watch the Chargers start rolling, because that's been a team that like has constantly been eaten up by injuries, bad coach, and just self-inflicted and unself-inflicted wounds. So I'm really interested to see if the Chargers can actually turn this into a run. and it shows how dangerous they could be. This is Harbaugh's first year. Imagine if he gets 2 or 3 years, he gets to start making some of the moves that he wants to make on this roster, what that could turn into. Agreed. Pittsburgh, Baltimore divisional matchups are always going to be good. Minnesota and the Rams could be interesting because, like, Detroit, did they throw out the framework there for, this is how you stop Sam Darnold? Sam Darnold's not who we all think he's, which me and you don't think he is this stud, worthy of $50 million this offseason per year quarterback. But he was showing to people, I think I can be, but that's going to be an interesting matchup because I think I'm leaning the way of the Rams in that matchup. They showed the stats of Sam Darnold versus Detroit and the Rams, and then Sam Darnold versus a field. He is 0-3 against the Lions. He played twice and lost, and then the Rams, they played once. So 0-3 against those two teams, 14-0 against everybody else. So it'll be interesting to see. That was one of the teams that we talked about leading up to the playoffs. Do we want to see the Rams? Not really. You don't want to see the Rams. And now where the game is not, where the game is now going to be in Arizona, that kind of changes everything too. Washington, Tampa, yeah, I agree. Like, I think Philly and Green Bay, just the way that they match up and just the way that the two teams have headed towards the playoffs feels like such a good match. Like, Pittsburgh's been on a low. Houston's banged up and on a low. Baltimore is Baltimore, but Denver, as good as Denver's been in circumstances, it's the Buffalo Bills. It's Josh Allen. That just doesn't feel like you're going to win that matchup. It just feels like some teams are like, these two teams have been headed in a similar direction, heading towards this playoff matchup, and it's going to be a really good matchup. I agree. I think it definitely has a chance to be one of the best matchups. Although I'm intrigued by Washington and Tampa, but I think Washington is not who Washington fans think that like Jane Daniels is what everybody thinks Jane Daniels is. I just think that the rest of the team, they're still a year or two away and some pieces away. Like I said a few weeks back when we played them.
I also think it's funny that the Texans, every playoff game in their franchise history has been at the Saturday 4:30 game. Like, every one of them. That's their time slot.
They earn that slot, and they don't do well in it either. So
I don't know if they earned it as more as they're like the boring. I hate to say it, they're like the boring team in the playoffs, coming from that crappy division. Looking at Green Bay again, the Rams might be the best team that Green Bay has beaten so far this year. They lost both to the Lions, they lost both to the Vikings, they lost to the Eagles, and they should have lost both to the Bears. But only beat the Bears. The first game, the Bears had a field goal that was blocked, and they lost by 1. Like, the Packers were a blocked field goal away from going 0-6 in the division. So, like, it's tough to gauge what type of team the Packers are. They are a good team, but, like, are they good because they just beat a bunch of bad opponents? It's tough to tell. So this is going to be a big test early on in this game on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean, I shared on, if you follow us on X, Twitter, at Kelly Greenhour, I shared a stat that Adam Schefter shared of scoring margin versus playoff teams this season. There's only 6 teams that actually had plus percentages. 2 of them had less than +5. So, and one of the teams that was in the negative was Green Bay. Green Bay is a negative 15 score margin against playoff teams this year. Baltimore plus 112, Detroit plus 36, Philly plus 29, Tampa plus 26, KC plus 4, Denver plus 3. Everybody else has negative scoring margins. So that just goes to show, I agree with you, that like they've beat up on some not so good teams, and the teams that are actually in the playoffs, the actual teams that you have to beat, you've been a negative. And I understand that, within the national media, they've often said about the Green Bay Packers, they may have one of the best like list of losses because they've lost to a lot of really good teams. But that's not necessarily always a good thing, just because you have we lost to Philly, we lost to Detroit ×2, we lost to Minnesota ×2. Like, just because you have those on your list doesn't mean you're a good team because you lose to against the good opponents. You got to beat, at least in some of those circumstances, beat the good opponents. But I think, like that stat of score margin against playoff teams while circumstances change, injuries, a lot of things change. That tells a big story about teams like, Tampa's in a plus situation. Washington's like a minus 30 against playoff teams. Like, it tells a very, very big story, a significant story about the teams and what to look for this weekend, because have some of these teams been able to turn the tide, or are they still just, a team that might be a player or a year away or a few players away or some position needs away from becoming a true contender?
And then also, the NFL is different from the other sports because it's not a series. It's a best of one. It's an any given Sunday type of deal. Like if the Eagles and Packers played 10 times, the Eagles might win 7 of 10, maybe 6 of 10, but like 1 of 1, anything can happen. The Bills could lose to the Broncos, but if they were to play 10 times, the Bills probably win 8 times. Like if it was a series, the better team would win majority of the time. But the fact that it's a 1-game series, it's any given Sunday, bring it. If you don't bring your A game, when at 4:30 on Sunday, the better team, the Eagles are favored by 5 or something like that. The better team can lose. So like that's the big difference between the NFL and Major League Baseball or the NHL or the crappy NBA. Like it's not a series, so you need to bring your A game, bring your best game, or you're going to be home the next week. You'll be planning your vacation, booking your D times.
And you talk about you were talking about like, do you let Jalen Hurts take that one hit, see what happens earlier in the episode? What if Carson Wentz doesn't take that hit against Seattle Seahawks?
Yeah.
Like those circumstances.
It was a cheap shot hit though.
It was a way cheaper hit than, the one that even Jalen Hurts took a few weeks back. But still, that's the what if. What if that one hit is a cheap shot hit? You never know what that hit's going to be. But it just brings to mind, like, the whole, it's a 1 of 1 matchup. We've seen 1 of 1 matchups like that situation with Carson Wentz, like A.J. Brown. Not that A.J. Brown necessarily was the be-all, end-all last year, but maybe he would have been the be-all, end-all if he was in that game last year. We don't know, but that 1 of 1, that situation with injuries in certain circumstances, you just don't want to test it, and you just don't know what's going to happen in the NFL. So like you said, it doesn't matter. Best of 7, sure, you could go 7 games and beat Green Bay 4-2 or 4-1, but this is a 1 of 1, and you just don't want to test some of those things and situations.
Yeah. And I forget what I was going to say. Crap. I definitely forget what I was going to say. Wow. Whatever. Can't believe I lost my train of thought there.
So rare.
What were you talking? Oh my God. It was something important too, and I can't believe I forgot what I wanted to say. I'll probably
we're
remember.
Talking about the 1 of 1, the matchups, the injuries. Don't take the bad shots. I don't know. It's never, once it's gone, it doesn't come back.
It is. I'll remember it after we're done. Probably whatever. Yeah. So let's. Obviously, these two teams have played before. Week 1, both teams are very. This is what I wanted to say. I knew I was going to remember. You talk about the importance of A.J. Brown and how last year he might not have been the end-all but be-all. The Eagles have lost 1 game with A.J. Brown this year. True, that was the Washington game. Like, he is we know how limited the passing offense looks without A.J. Brown. Even when you have Devontae Smith out there, Dallas Goedert out there, Saquon Barkley out there. Like, we know how limited. So he actually, like, we talk about it, like, the most important part. Who is the most important part of the offense? We know what the Eagles look like when Lane Johnson's not out there. Jalen Hurts, he's the quarterback, the starter, but they were able to put some points on the board and move the ball with Kenny Pickett and Tanner McKee. We haven't seen what they look like without Saquon Barkley. I'm not counting the last game. But we have seen what the team looks like without A.J. Brown. Earlier this year, it was like 3 games, and they went, 1-2? Or they went 2-2 if it was 4 games, whatever it was. So, I mean, it was a middling concern when there was talk of, AJ not practicing, but I kind of had a feeling, look, they're going to rest him. Like, he doesn't need to be out there running when you don't need to run. Let him get his knee as good as it's going to get, so that he's able to be. He's not going to be 100% on Sunday, but he can be at. Let's get on the field and let's make some play, status. So I do think AJ Brown is really important. He made second team All Pro and played 12 games this year, I think. Like he may have led the league in yards per catch or whatever. Like he didn't have a lot of catches, but had over 1,000 yards. Like he was really outstanding. And the fact that he made second team All Pro and only playing about 12 games just talks about the type of player. He is superhuman. He is such a good player. Easily the best receiver the Eagles have had since T.O.
13 games, and I think the stat he leads the league in his yards per reception at 16.1, I believe. Because I think there's a stat out there of players who have less than 75 receptions and over 1,000 yards or something. And there's only about 4 of them. And Terry McLaurin and AJ Brown are on that list. I just remember that off the top of my head. So I think the stat that he leads the league in his yards per reception, and we know he's a vital part of it. There are a few teams, and there are a few, like when you look at these rosters, 53 men, how many teams do you know compare their stats when we have this guy, or their records of when we have this guy and when we don't have this guy? We have 2 guys that we do that with, Lane Johnson and AJ Brown. So you know how important these guys are when you can pull up a stat and you can say, wow, look at the record without these guys in the lineup. And we know how vitally important both of those guys are. As great as Jordan Mailata is, we don't look at a stat of what are we like without Jordan Mailata, because we won games without Jordan Mailata. We were able to do things without him. Like you said, we don't know much without Jalen Hurts. We don't know much about Saquon Barkley or Devontae Smith, but we do know for certain in the length of time that we've had these guys on the roster, and we can look back with these 2 guys and some of the games they've missed, Lane Johnson and AJ Brown are vital, vital pieces. And at this point, AJ Brown may be one of the most vital pieces because he absolutely changes the way that you can run this entire offense. We don't even have a stat for Dallas Goedert not in the lineup because we've been so good without Dallas Goedert in the lineup. Like, you don't even have to worry about it. That just goes to show how important this wide receiving duo is. And I still say it's a duo too because Devontae Smith's still really important.
Dallas Goedert is a lot better blocker than Calcaterra, though.
Okay, that's true. That's true.
Noticeable. That is
noticeable for sure.
All right, let's jump into our players of the game, keys to the game before we get to our predictions. So you can give your players and keys. I'll give mine, and then we'll give our predictions, which I have mine written down, so I can't say that I'm copying off of you. So go ahead with your players and keys of the game, Connor.
My player of the game is going to be the wide receiver that goes up against Keyshawn Nixon. Keyshawn Nixon, among cornerbacks for the Green Bay Packers, has the most targets against. There's clearly something there that teams are seeing, that teams are trying to take advantage of. So I'm going with that one. And Keyshawn Nixon is currently the right cornerback. Obviously, Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, there's no discrimination to right side, left side of the field or where they line up. But it's going to be whoever is there, and hopefully – Kellen Moore realizes, Jalen Hurts realizes, and they take advantage of that. So I'm going to go with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown on this one because they're both banged up. Both of them are going to be lined up across from Keyshawn Nixon, who is going to be one of the replacements, obviously, for Jair Alexander. How can you take advantage of being without Jair Alexander? You find a guy that other teams have also went off and found as kind of a weak point. And that seems to be Keyshawn Nixon. He's played 1,000 snaps. He has 82 targets, 56 receptions allowed, 501 yards allowed, and 5 touchdowns. So he is probably the guy that you go to and look to go against.
He almost had a pick 6 in the first game.
Well, things have changed. Jair Alexander was around then. So things have changed. So we're going to see, this cornerback room is not like the worst, like from a pass and defense perspective. They're not as bad as people get. And Jair Alexander has missed a handful of time throughout this entire season, and they rank the 13th pass and defense in the league. But you got to take advantage of a weak point when you see it. Obviously, when teams look and, we have Avonte Maddox on the field, they salivate. at the opportunity to throw the ball against him. So you find the one that other teams have been throwing against and where he's given up the yardage and the touchdowns, and you go that direction. So I'm going to go with the key player of the game is going to be whoever's lined up against Keyshawn Nixon and to make those plays. Defensively, my player to watch is going to be Nolan Smith. Nolan Smith has been doing really good. He's been standing out. There's a handful of players. Like I could pick some guys in the secondary because they've been forcing turnovers and making plays. But I'm going with Nolan Smith because I think it's going to be all important that they create pressure up front. And Nolan Smith, since the injury to Huff, has taken a stranglehold of that spot across from Josh Sweat as the edge rusher. So I'm going with Nolan Smith. Josh Sweat's been, I can't really get excited about him, but I can get excited about Nolan Smith and what he's been doing and what he's been able to produce. But it's definitely going to come down to like those front five. I call it five. It's a 3-4 defense, but obviously we have Nolan Smith rushing, we have Josh Sweat rushing. Those guys aren't dropping back very often. So it's going to come down to those front five. It's going to be important that those guys create pressure and they close the gaps and make life as easy as possible on, the secondary and the linebackers to make the decision on where to go and where to make that tackle on like Josh Jacobs and stopping Josh Jacobs. So those are my key players, keys to the game. I mean, from a defensive perspective, stop Josh Jacobs. If you can stop Josh Jacobs and you can force Jordan Love to throw the ball and you can create pressure against Jordan Love will make mistakes. Jordan Love is a guy who's made mistakes in high-pressure moments, and he's a guy who's going to continue to make those mistakes. He's young. It's a young team altogether. You can do it, especially when he's missing a key weapon like Christian Watson. Offensively, there's a few keys. I'm going to go with the offensive line has to be stout and top-notch. They have to protect Jalen Hurts. He has to be so confident to be able to stand in that pocket. We don't want him bailing out of the pocket. We don't want him having to unnecessarily run where he doesn't have to. So my key to the game is that offensive line putting together their best game. Of all the games that they put together this year, this game has to be the game. Protect Jalen Hurts. Open up the holes for Saquon Barkley. Do everything that everyone hypes you up to be as the number one offensive line in this league that we know you are. We know Lane Johnson's playing with a chip on his shoulder. He just lost All-Pro to Penei Sewell. He's got that thing hanging in his locker that's all over social media, showing all the stats of him being better than Penei Sewell in every statistical category possible. So there's a chip on the shoulder for some of these guys. Jordan Mailata, he didn't make the Pro Bowl. There's chips on the shoulder for these guys to show we're the best, and we only got left off because this is the best offensive line. You can't take all five of us. So show us that you're the best offensive line. Protect Jalen Hurts. Open up those holes for Saquon Barkley. Make life easier on those two guys because those are the two guys who you can ride to the finish line and win this game.
I think 4 of the 5 made the Pro Bowl last year. So, I mean, they can, in theory, take all of them.
This is true.
On the offensive side of the ball, I'm going to go Jalen Hurts. We haven't seen him in about a month. And he's going to have to protect the football. That's going to be my key. In the game against Green Bay week 1, he threw 2 interceptions, probably had 5 turnover-worthy plays. I think he only turned the ball over, or he threw 5 interceptions all year, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So he did a really good job this year of protecting the football. Now, a lot of that could have been he was gun-shy on a couple of occasions, and the Eagles became a running football team. They ran the ball for over 3,000 yards this year. So that could be why the turnovers were down a little bit, but it's a good sign because last year he had a lot of turnovers, and you got to keep an eye on where Xavier McKinney is on the field. That he's a ball hawk. The 2 big free agents that the Giants let go both made first-team All-Pro in Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley. So
I remember week 5.
Their coach and GM are coming back, so that's a big win for the Eagles.
I remember in week 5 we were talking about how much we probably – and listen, I think that CJGJ is important for the mentality and what he brings.
He had 6 interceptions this year, CJGJ.
I know he almost – I think he's second or third in the league in interceptions, so he's still vitally important from a ball hawk standpoint too, I still think I would have preferred Xavier McKinney, but for the, the culture and everything, CJ just seemed to fit and stuff. But I mean, I just want to reference like back in week 5 when he was averaging 2 missed tackles a game and doing nothing for the defense. We both were highly like we would have taken Xavier McKinney. I still think I would have anyways, but he fits the culture and what we wanted to back with
really,
him.
really good. And obviously CJGJ is good too.
Sure.
I in off season prefer Xavier McKinney. That's me being a Bama fan too. Like he's really good. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm gonna go Jalen Carter. It's gonna, like you mentioned earlier, it's gonna be up to him and Jordan Davis to hold their blocks, not allow gaping holes so that Josh Jacobs can get through. I think Jacobs finished top 5. He might have been 3 or 4 in the league in rushing. It's crazy how Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs all changed teams, and their teams are in the playoffs, and their former teams are not. Their former teams are bad.
And led the team in rushing.
And led the league in rushing in Saquon's case over 2,000 yards. So Jalen Carter, who made first team All-Pro, he made first team All-Pro from the NFLPA, and he made second team All-Pro from the AP, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, like he's been outstanding this year. And look, if you look at his stats, he doesn't have the sacks and tackles and all that, but he gets double teamed 50-60% of the time. He gets double teamed almost more than anyone in the league. So he's got a lot of respect from his peers, and everybody sees the talent he is, and he dropped to number 9 for the Eagles to draft. So like as an Eagles fan, I'm not complaining. He is really, really good. And I'm excited to just see his continued growth. He definitely has a Defensive Player of the Year award in his future. And my key on the defensive side of the football is get pressure on Jordan Love. And if you can stop the running game, that'll negate the play action pass game. And, hopefully you get Jordan Love to throw a turnover. He will throw you the football. And as long as you're able to get pressure and as long as the DBs are able to stay with the receivers and you don't allow gaping holes, then the Eagles defense should be fine. All right, prediction time. What's your score, Connor?
It's going to be close. Like you said, it's going to be a really good game. We're going to sit there. Every time the Eagles make the playoffs, I promise you I leave the playoffs with 5 less years on my life. I promise you. I know, if I was planning to live to be, 80 or 90 years old with the playoffs that we've been to, the Super Bowl, I'm down to about 60 at this point. Let's just face it. So I'm going Eagles, and I know I picked the Packers to go to the Super Bowl. Circumstances changed. A lot of things have changed.
You also picked the Packers week 1, by the way, just saying.
See, maybe it's an omen. Like, I don't want to say it's a bad omen, but maybe it's an omen about this game, but I don't want it to be. So I'm going with the Eagles on this one. And it's gonna be close. 27-24 Eagles.
So Connor says 27-24 Eagles. By the way, in the regular season, I was 11-6. Connor was 8-9. Quentin says his key, call some play action passes for the key.
Tech is trying to make that QB controversy right here.
Just it's Jalen Hurts' team. It's going to be Jalen Hurts' team.
QB controversy is
now if he gets knocked out the game. I mean, I think Pickett is the backup QB right now, but
you can't. The way McKee played, you got to put McKee out there.
Well, so the way that works, they're probably going to have Pickett be the backup, and McKee is going to be inactive but be the emergency. You can't bring the emergency quarterback in the game unless the first 2 are hurt. So let's just hope that Jalen doesn't get hurt. My score prediction, it's going to be close early, and I think that the Eagles have a play late that kind of hits the spread, so to speak, and the Eagles win 27-17. 10 points does seem like a lot, but it's going to be kind of like a late score. It's going to be 7. It's going to be 20-17. The Eagles are going to have the ball, maybe have a nice 6, 7, 8 minute drive, score a touchdown, and go up 2 scores. And they will be hosting a divisional matchup next week, which they could face the Buccaneers, the Rams, or the Vikings. They can't face Washington. If Washington beats Buccaneers, they go to Detroit. But yeah, I don't know if I want it to be the Buccaneers, to be honest with you.
I don't know if I want it to be any of those teams, but eventually you would have to face one of those teams.
I don't think Sam Darnold comes to Philly and wins a game. I'm just saying.
I agree. I agree with you. Sam Darnold, like everyone was like they were debating like Sam Darnold after that game against Detroit. How much money did he lose? And some people are like, he lost zeros on his contract. If he lost that game and then he goes and he loses his game to the Rams, he went, there's no way you give him $50 million. There's no way I even give him $40 million. But we pay mediocre quarterbacks because there's such a desperate need to force a QB to work.
Dak's making $60 million.
Yeah, Dak's the highest paid quarterback right now in the league. So
isn't he the highest paid player? Well, per year average, he's the highest paid player.
Per year average, for sure, yeah.
Excuse me. All right.
Which bring back Mike McCarthy, by the way. Bring him back. Why you waited this long to negotiate the contract is beyond me, but bring him back.
Dable's back with the Giants. McCarthy is back.
Dallas is bringing him back. The only people we got to worry about are the Washington Commanders at this point. I'm good.
Eagles Commanders for the next couple of years, and well, yeah. I mean, and your boy Micah Parsons saying that Dallas is going to hold the trophy next year. He couldn't even say which trophy they were going to hold next year, by the way, which is funny. But
that's why. Like, wait until the end of the playoffs. Y'all are out of the playoffs.
He wants to be an Eagle so bad. I don't care what anybody says. All right,
thank you all for tuning. He's going to be holding the trophy in midnight green, is what he's trying to say.
Yep, he didn't hold one at Fraud State either, too. But that's a different story for a different day. Thank you all for tuning into the Kelly Green Hour. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJRaw54. And follow the Eagles Pinpool Network on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcast at Eagles Pinpool Network. Eagles, Packers, Wildcard Weekend Sunday, 4:30. It's going to be a fun one at Lincoln Financial Field. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.
Fly, Eagles, fly.